Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, March 5th, and today's show is mainly going to be talking about the life and legacy and career of former Notre Dame head coach Lou Holtz, who passed away yesterday at the age of 89, won 100 games at Notre Dame. He is the last official national championship head coach at Notre Dame. He's a college football Hall of Famer. He was inducted in 2008. A lot of people enjoyed him on the college football show with Mark May. It was actually like considering where everything is, like college game day final is now. I feel like that show has aged very well, and just in terms of
like an
what
end
it
of an
was.
era after it's gone.
Yeah, like you didn't appreciate it as much then as you do now because of I think all those shows are kind of a clown show at this point. It was a little different time, but we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about our favorite games, our favorite moments. I think we both grew up during the era of Lou and his time at Notre Dame, and that obviously shaped our fandom and why we're here on this show discussing it. So that's going to be the bulk of the show. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, of course, hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know whatever it is we are going live. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches, from All-Americans to All-Pros and Associates to CEOs. You're in great hands with ESQ's custom clothing. Whether you're looking for a perfect fitting suit, a standout sport coat, or a perfect tuxedo for wedding galas, ESQ's master tailors blend traditional hand stitching in each garment with Italy and England's best fabrics. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. Just to put a little bow on something that we mentioned on the last show, Jamie, my niece did in fact win the CIF championship on over the weekend. So congratulations to her, the Milliken Rams women's soccer team. First championship in the history of the school. So it was very cool. So congratulations to her. It was awesome for the entire family. Jamie, I think the thing about Lou is, as we get into this, the thing about him is, as you kind of go back, and I've studied this a lot. I'm kind of a nerd for that era, especially because it was how my fandom was created. When you look at Lou and the way he came in, he did something that I think is very similar to what Marcus Freeman did when he came in. He fully embraced what Notre Dame was and kind of wants to be, and what the fan base wants to be. In that, like, Notre Dame is special. There's a magic to Notre Dame. There's a magic to the Dome. It's like kind of a magical place. And I think that he embraced that in a way that I don't think the coaches that came after him really did. Not even Charlie Weiss, which is interesting because he was a student at Notre Dame, but I don't know that he embraced it the way that Lou did. And I think Marcus Freeman has done that now. And so we can kind of get to that later. But I just think that's something that I appreciated about Lou Holtz and his approach to Notre Dame. It's just that he fully embraced the mystique and what it meant to be a Notre Dame head coach.
Yeah, and I think that's too why obviously he was, he had like a borderline Hall of Fame career before he even came to Notre Dame, obviously, right? At NC State and Arkansas and Minnesota was horrible. Minnesota was basically like Rutgers, and he all of a sudden he comes there. They're like, close to 500. He definitely changed things there. But the thing is when he got the job, it was like everybody kind of knew it was his dream job. Yeah. And it's kind of like what people wanted for Urban Meyer, who was obviously a former Holtz assistant. And that's how people thought of, they were like, man, they want someone who's like embrace Notre Dame in that way. And it's someone that the fans can relate to. And I think too that it's also why people rooted so hard for Jerry Faust, right? Like they really wanted Jerry Faust to be what he wasn't. And and why people still have affection for him and all those things, even despite the failures, because they know that his heart was like fully in it. And I think that was just the thing with like Lou Holtz, is he kind of embodied what all these people thought about. Like he thought of Notre Dame in a way that he put it on a pedestal, and that's what and that's the way it kind of needed to be treated. It wasn't just like Bob Davie, who you would think, because he was a Holtz assistant, that he'd understand that like you have to kind of treat it in a certain way. It's like you kind of have to be like how Marcus Freeman treats it, right? Where it's like it's different. And it's not just different because it's a big job. It's just different because it's different. And it's the whole the famous quote, which I think is the best quote anyone has ever said about Notre Dame in general, is, "For those who know Notre Dame, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't, no explanation will suffice."
Yeah.
And it's just one of these things that he understood it right away. And it's why it kind of like, yes, the winning and all that kind of stuff too, but there was all like a little bit of extra magic because of that.
I mean, and he cited it all the time, and I think that was, it spoke to me as a young person, right? Like it definitely spoke to me in that time. I think when I think about him, I feel like he was like Notre Dame's version of what Pete Carroll was, because when he came in, Notre Dame was struggling. Obviously, he came in and replaced Jerry Faust. In '85, they had just got absolutely bamboozled by Miami, just got dog walked. It was 58-7. So he was fired. And I think for him, it was like, hey, there's a respect thing going on. People don't respect you. Right. And he thought there's a speech that he gave in the locker room where he's talking about, it's about respect around the country. Look at me in the eye. I'm here now. And say it to me now. Like, say it to me. Like having that toughness and having that respect. And, went 5-6 the first year, but like they lost barely to Michigan to open the season. At the end of the season, this is when, Tim Brown had a great game against USC at USC. That kind of propelled Notre Dame forward. That first year went really well. 5-6 first year, 8-4 in the second year. They actually were 8-1, and they kind of fell apart at the end of the year with Heisman winner Tim Brown. But that kind of catapulted them into 1988 when they obviously win the national title. But it was about like that. He embraced it. It was an, Pete Carroll's whole thing was like always compete. Right. And I think Lou didn't put it that way, but that's how he took it on, and just like, hey, like we are going to be a tougher, more, physical program. He talked about Chris Zorich and how he was sobbing after the Cotton Bowl in 1987 when they lost to Texas A&M. Chris Zorich didn't even play, and he's like sobbing the fact that they lost the game. And he's like, that's the kind of guy that we need,
Yeah.
That's a leader on this team. Like that's the attitude that we have to have. And so I think like that is what it's just kind of, and obviously Chris Zorich went on to be an All-American at Notre Dame and a very good pro. Probably, I assume he's a college football Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's in the college football.
Yeah. So it's just like, that's what he came on to be, but that's kind of what Lou embodied at Notre Dame. Obviously win the national title in 1988. The Miami game is one of them, obviously the most famous games in the history of college football. Obviously with him and Notre Dame, they win 31-30. The famous quote, "Save Jimmy Johnson's ass for me." The fact that there was there were multiple pregame fights. I don't know if it was in 88, but like that team had like that era, like from 88 to 90, there were multiple pregame fights in the tunnels. I think they had a skirmish with USC. They definitely were fighting Miami in 1988. And it was one of those things where it happened because Miami was kind of encroaching in their space. This is when all teams kind of went up the tunnel. They didn't have their own separate tunnel back then. Miami's encroaching in their space, and Notre Dame normally would acquiesce to them, and they wouldn't give an inch. And they ended up getting in like a big fight. at the end of the thing, and that just kind of speaks to the attitude that Notre Dame had at the time, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think because there's one, on the one hand, we talked about like his reverence for Notre Dame, but I think too he brought that kind of like different attitude towards it, like where before there was like the aura about Notre Dame was almost like, oh, Notre Dame could almost win as they walked into the stadium, and then it wasn't like that anymore. They weren't the bully, and they were getting bullied, and they had to get guys like obviously like Zorich and so many guys from that era that they had a different mentality. And I think it's extremely similar to the current team right now too, and to Marcus Freeman too, where I think, Marcus Freeman, you hear him talk and he's articulate and respectful and does all of these things that represent the university well. But he preaches violence on the football field and physicality, and that was those Holtz teams. They were absolutely offensive, defensive line. That's where they were built, and they obviously had great skill players. Tim Brown and Rocket Ismail and Ricky Waters and Reggie Brooks, Bettis. We can list like 10 other guys, just freaks, right? Derek Mays, so many great players, so many great skill guys, but the heart of the team was the line on offense and defense. And you think about like Joe Moore and what Joe Moore means to the university and offensive line play in general. And Joe Moore obviously, was of that era and helped build that team. And you think about like Barry Alvarez and him basically that was the start of everything Barry Alvarez became at Wisconsin, and him being a legend there, right? So it's crazy too if you look at too like all the assistants and the different people that came through during that time. And I mean it obviously makes sense when you think about the success they had, but man, there's so many guys that just like were connected to him at that time that went on and like did great things.
You could make the case because of the talent that they accrued at the university over that period of time. I was actually Tim O'Malley about this. I mean, it was a couple years ago. Tim O'Malley of Irish Illustrated, like, what were those rosters then like what we think of like Ohio State now or like Georgia? And he's like 100%. Like Notre Dame had the top rosters back then. And if you think about that, like, I don't want to say underachieved, but like to only win one national title, like for the 89, 90, 92 team specifically, not to win national titles. I mean, given the talent that was on those teams, you could call that an underachievement. Now, if this was in the current climate where there was a playoff, right? I don't know that anyone would have wanted to face that 89. Like in 89, they lost to Miami, yes, but in the bowl game, in the Orange Bowl, they beat number 1 Colorado 21-6, right? So they beat the number 1 team in the country in the bowl game, right? By a lot. And that was when, the national title came down to AP voting and coaches poll, right? And they voted for Miami, obviously. In 90, like that's a team that played, and this is a famous clip here, that's the team that played Colorado, who was again number 1 in the country. And they lost 10-9 on the the phantom clip, and one of the most famous plays in college football history again. That's a team that's like you don't really want to see them in the playoffs. The 92 team, another one. I think they finished 4 or 3 overall. They beat Texas A&M, who was previously undefeated in the Cotton Bowl. They beat them 28-0. Or I'm sorry, was it 28-0 or 28-3? Either way, they didn't score a touchdown. I know that. Next, Texas A&M was previously undefeated. Won that game. That was a team that no one wanted to see in the playoff if had there been one. So he had those quality, caliber teams. Terrible loss to Stanford in 1990, like at home. lost 36-31. They couldn't connect with, Derek Brown in the end zone on the final play of the game when they end up losing. Stanford was 5-6 that year. They lost to San Jose State the week before. That Stanford team did. So not good. That's not a good loss. And then they lost to Stanford again in 1992. That pretty much knocked them out of the national title picture. But he built great teams. We could have a debate whether it was 90 or 92, but when you think of the Holtz era and that time, do you feel like it was an underachievement? The fact that it was only the one national title, the quality of teams that he had in 89, 90, and 92. Do you see that as kind of like an underachievement during the Holtz era?
I mean, slightly because of only one national championship, but let's be honest, they should have had two. 93 was a national championship team. Everybody knows it. Even the people who voted for Bobby Bowden at that time and voted because they literally, that's how it worked, was Bobby Bowden might not ever get one. So let's make sure he gets one.
A total disgrace, by the way.
It was a total disgrace. And that's why they did it, because I can't even imagine the outrage now of imagine at the end of the season, end of this regular season, and they said Notre Dame national champion, Miami. No. And it was between Miami and Notre Dame, and Miami had beaten Notre Dame. And I know it was week 1 or whatever and all that stuff, but think of the reaction of the whole Miami thing the whole entire time during the CFP. Now imagine that Notre Dame beat Florida State in 93 and they just acted like it didn't happen. That is just insane. That is insane. And obviously there's a lot more thing that's more muddled because it was Nebraska was undefeated and there was other things that were at that time that were how the bowl games worked out with the A&M and stuff too. But really, if you think about it, they should have had a rematch or something like that in the bowl game. But even then they would have said, well, Nebraska could have been the national championship because they were undefeated. And
right.
Things were so spread out then. They should have won it then. But I mean, the 91 team or the 92 team, they had 7 future first round picks on that team. That's Alabama. That is Nick Saban, Alabama running through everybody basically at that time. Just imagine Rick Meyer, Jerome Bettis, Tom Carter, Irv Smith, Bryant Young, Aaron Taylor, Jeff Burris. This isn't even getting into
that's not even
third round.
It's not getting to Bobby Taylor. It's not getting into Reggie Brooks.
Yeah,
it's not getting into those guys.
Yeah, Tim Ruddy, Jim Flanagan, Dawson. They were loaded. Those teams, and so I 100% agree with Tim O'Malley that just look at those rosters.
Yeah. So Willie Clark, do you remember who Willie Clark is?
Yeah.
Okay. So just so people understand, Willie Clark he played DB and he played running back at different times. So in the 90, 91, 92 seasons, he was mostly a defensive back, a corner. And then in 93, they had some injuries. So it's okay, now you're a running back. And he got real carries at running back. And so he was that. Didn't really have a position at Notre Dame. He was a 5th round pick. He went to I think it was the Colts. He played in the NFL as a defensive back. That's the kind of he was just a guy. I can't even if I'm trying to think of someone right now. Just of the 6th DB for Notre Dame right now, played some running back, was a 5th round pick in the NFL. This is the type of roster that they had. Demetrius Dubose, John Imperios pointing out, I believe he was a 2nd round pick as well. This is the type of talent that they had. Just reserve players on the roster were getting picked in the 5th round of the NFL.
It's really incredible, right? So yeah, from that standpoint, and we should mention obviously Vinny Serrato was a huge part of compiling that
recruiting
talent.
Coordinator. Yeah.
And that was also just no one else had a Vinny Serrato at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Lou Holtz, you got to have some foresight to make that move.
100.
you know? So that is something he does not get enough credit for. Like, he should get way more credit for that, because that was not something, you know, there wasn't anybody like him, like Serrato at that time, who did what he did. And I think too, there's so many like different what ifs too at the end, obviously, with like, I mean, Randy Moss is like the hugest what if of all time for Notre Dame and the end of the Holtz era. Because that obviously, I think if he went there, maybe Holtz sticks around a few more years or something like that could have happened.
I honestly, I do think they would have won a national championship with Randy Moss around, and I'll get to that in a second, because that is a huge what if. There's another one too, by the way. That there's like really big one.
Yeah, and it's funny because obviously, there wasn't, Rivals and all that kind of stuff wasn't around then. Like Rivals was the start of like the internet era recruiting and all that. That was like Super Prep and Alan Wallace. Mike Frank was like building spreadsheets in his basement or something. I don't know. But like before Mike was even doing it, right? That was like that time. And it's funny because all at that time Notre Dame was just like, and I used to go and I'd buy like the USA Today college football preview thing. And that's how I would learn about the recruiting class. Like I would, read about it there, and you'd read about like obviously all these different guys that they signed, and like the Randy Kinders and the Jimmy Fridays and all these guys. And you're taking it all in, and then it just became a thing too. Like you just knew things changed when everything about it later on, every story post Lou Holtz was always, well, they didn't sign this guy. They didn't sign TJ Duckett. They didn't sign this, whatever. Like there's all these huge things of like, well, he grew up a Notre Dame fan, but then he didn't, whatever. Like, and that was just one of these things that it so flipped, and it just showed like he was doing things that nobody else could replicate after. And obviously that was like, I mean, even if you look at like that Bob Davie staff, most of those guys were like Urban Meyer staff later on.
Yeah.
And had a ton of success, and with those guys later on. It wasn't even come close to like what they were doing recruiting wise.
Yeah. Let's get into the what ifs. What if in 1990 the clip isn't called against Rocket? They were 9-2 at the time. They would have finished 10-2. They would have just beaten number 1 Colorado. They would have had a claim to a national championship. And honestly, you would think they would actually have done it, because it's Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech on the one. They just beat number 1 Colorado. They had already beaten number 1 Miami that year. So they already had 2 wins against the number 1 team in the country. They would have been 10-2. Georgia Tech finished, I think it was 10-1-1, right? So they had 1 loss, 1 tie, essentially the same. Notre Dame has the better wins. Like for that ref to call the clipping in that moment on the Colorado sideline is honestly one of the most embarrassing things that has happened in a long, that's a disgrace. Like it is truly, you can't call it. First of all, it's not correct. Second of all, you're standing like 20 yards away and you're on the Colorado sideline. Like it ends the game. This is like an iconic moment in the history of college football that they're letting go. So that's like a what if moment there. You mentioned Randy Moss. I'll get to him in a second because I think the things are related. So 1992, let's go back to the time in recruiting where like there was the banquet weekend when they had like every recruit in the world would come in for the team's banquet. Yeah. And then the in-home visit was like everything. Like it was everything, right? And there were no like commitments. There was none of that stuff, right? I mean, I'm sure there were, but it wasn't like X player has committed to Notre Dame. What happens is they send the fax to the player and they fax it back, right? And that's how you get the letter of intent. And that's how you know they're coming, right? So Lou Holtz in 1992 visits a quarterback in Florida by the name of Tommy Frazier.
Oh man.
They think that it is Lou Holtz's impression that they are going to sign Tommy Frazier in 1992. It is going to happen, right? They send the fax, or they send the fax. They expect it to come back. It never comes back. Tommy Frazier goes to Nebraska, right? The next year, they go in and they sign Ron Paulus, the greatest quarterback in the history of everything at the time from Pennsylvania, right? Now, if you look at the way Notre Dame played offense and the way that Lou Holtz played offense with Tony Rice, and then Rick Mirer is Rick Mirer was a very good athlete. He could run option, he could do all those things, he could scramble for things. That's not Ron Paulus's game at all. Like the program and the way that they played and the way that they recruited was geared towards a Tommy Frazier type of quarterback.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the Ron Paulus thing in a second, because I have a hot take about him as well coming up that I think you're really going to enjoy, Jamie. But I just think, like, had Notre Dame signed Tommy Frazier and he ends up at Notre Dame, when you look at the running backs that they had in 93, 94, 95, 96, I mean, they had a special group. They had a special group of running backs. They had a very good offensive line throughout that entire tenure. It keeps the personality of not just the program, but the offense and the way that it was run and the way that they did things. And it would have blended a lot better with the receiving core that they ended up having. I think that's a huge what if there, Jamie. Your thoughts on the Tommy Frazier miss in 1992?
Well, and I mean, the fact that what he became in Nebraska too,
Right.
It was like Nebraska was always the team that couldn't win it all.
Right.
They always choked. They could never get it done. And then all of a sudden, Tommy Frazier comes along, and it's like, I mean, they play the fun and gun Spurrier team, and they just like put 60 on him.
Yeah.
Like, and he was incredible. Like, he was one of those. He never won the Heisman, but I remember him somehow as like he won a Heisman because
he had stuff with blood clots and stuff, like he had to miss games or whatever. So,
but he was just an absolutely incredible college football player, and obviously, you know, he at that time too, and maybe he was never going to be like, he would have got more of a shot in the NFL at a later time, but you know, he didn't really get a shot. But I think for that offense, I don't think you could pick a better quarterback, because obviously they ran a different version of the option, but they ran the option at Nebraska, and he was unreal at it. So, man, that is an absolutely huge one.
Yeah. So that leads to the signing of Ron Paulus, which everyone was very excited about, which then leads to the signing of Randy Moss. And if you the thing, when you look at that team, right? So I talked about the running backs. You had Autry Denson, you had Randy Kinder, you had Robert Farmer, you had Mark Edwards, you had Jamie Spencer, who Jamie Spencer has like some of the most unbelievable film in high school that you've ever seen. I actually have it. So they used to do a thing, and I've sent it to Tim Priester before. Blue and Gold, he worked for Blue and Gold at the time. Him and I can't remember his co-host name. I apologize. They had like a VHS tape of all the high school recruits. And this is the Randy Moss year. The Randy Moss year. It's the Corey Minor year. I mean, we were talking like if there was a time when they might have signed like the 1 and 2 players like in the country. If this was like, you know, the 247 on 3 or whatever, because Corey Minor was a national player of the year and Randy Moss was the offensive player of the year. So it's just like that would have been insane. But Randy Moss doesn't come. They didn't have a wide receiver drafted after Derek Mays left. They didn't have a wide receiver drafted, I don't believe, from any of those classes that followed. And I'm trying to remember. I might be wrong on Malcolm Johnson. If he was a late draft.
Malcolm Johnson did get picked.
Was he like
fifth round?
Fifth round. Okay. But after that, like nobody else. And so they just didn't have the wide receivers. Ron Paulus was a much better quarterback than I think you would give credit for. He just didn't have the wideouts. And the offense was geared towards giving the ball to Denson, giving the ball to Kinder, giving the ball to Farmer, giving the ball to Edwards. And it just didn't suit his game. Like if you look at some of the throws that he could make, he had something there, but he needed someone like Randy Moss. And I just think that really hurt him. The defense to me was good enough, definitely good enough in 95, 96 specifically. But they didn't have the offense and they couldn't throw the ball. And I think that's what happened. It's one of the huge what ifs for Notre Dame and Lou Holtz at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think even just the fact, I mean, let's be honest. He got kicked out of Florida State after too. So it's not like, okay, it's hard to just say like, oh, they should have just let him in and all this. It's like, but even for what he got kicked out of Florida State for, it was, I believe he tested positive for marijuana
a couple of times. Yeah.
Now, no one's getting kicked off the team, especially not Randy Moss.
Right.
So.
Well, I think he wasn't admitted to Notre Dame because there was a fight.
It was that kind of thing. But I mean, it's just one of it. So it's not like one of these things. Just the whole point is he wanted Notre Dame. He was like, it was his dream to go to Notre Dame.
Allen Iverson talked about wanting to play football at Notre Dame. Like this is what the juice was on Notre Dame at the time.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, Allen Iverson, Randy Moss at Notre Dame. Wow. But yeah, like I think he's one of the best football players, probably the second best receiver of all time behind Jerry Rice. Definitely the best receiver of his generation. I think he's better than Terrell Owens just because T.O. was such a horrible teammate. So
he's also just better
in general, but like, yeah. And as Randy Moss would said at the time when T.O. used to argue he's better for him, it's like, they don't change the defense for Terrell Owens. they're right. They're putting the safety over the top when Randy's out there. Gosh, I mean, he would have been, and the hype would have been out of control because just to have that level of guy in Notre Dame, I just think of Rocket and not even really utilized close to what his talent level was based on like, if you look at that's when people look at Rocket's numbers and they say like, yeah, he wasn't that good. Did you watch him? Yeah. Because if you watched him, he was that good. It was just a different era and they didn't fully utilize everything. Like they were, it was just a completely different era. And if he was another guy too, if he came like 5 years later, would have been totally different.
Yeah. I think like, I don't like, and then this is just going back to when I was of the age, like Holtz had this, like, you just kind of knew, like, man, that guy was like a big game coach. Like you just knew that he would just figure it out. Like he knew how to get the players prepared. I talked about this with Derek Mays a little bit. Like he just knew how to get them ready to play in a big game. And so think of the 93 Florida State game specifically. Like the players knew, he said that Derek Mays said the night before, like they all just kind of knew they were going to go and perform and they were going to have a great game and they were going to win. Like he was able to impart that on them. And like he had some, like we mentioned, like the Stanford losses in 90 and 92 were like not good losses, right? But like when it was time for a big game, like in 90, they beat number 1 Miami, right? Like in 92, they beat they go to USC and win, right? Like they have like some really strong victories. And they just he just knew how to win big games. They win the Penn State game in 1992. And the thing that I don't think Holtz gets credit for is like the playbook is like super limited, right? Like they're not, if you like, I've watched like almost all these games on YouTube before, and you just look at the types of plays and the variety of plays that they're running. It's just like very rudimentary, right? At the time, couldn't be very difficult to scout for, but the guy knew when to call a certain play and how to get like, oh, I've got the defense ready for this specific play, and then he would run it. Like I think he might have been the best reverse caller like ever. He was so good at calling reverses. Like that reverse against Florida State in 93 when they scored their first touchdown. First of all, he runs it to Adrian Jarrell, who he had one carry in his entire career prior to that, and it was 4 years prior. He had one carry, and he gives him the carry in the biggest game of the season. It was called the game of the century. He gives him a reverse, and there is nobody there. It's Clifton Abraham against 3 offensive linemen on the backside. There is nobody left. Florida State is completely fooled, and he just like he knows he had a feel for reverses. He had a feel for the tunnel screen. Like I showed the clip in 96 where it's 1 second before halftime, and they run a tunnel screen to the inch line. Like he just knew, like he was a very good play caller in the sense that like, man, he knew exactly what play to call at what time. And I don't think that he got enough credit for that. And you could talk about like the 92 Sugar Bowl against Florida, where Notre Dame had fired their defensive coordinator, Gary Darnell. I mean, everyone talks about like Lou, and the reason that he was the DC in that game was because he had fired his defensive coordinator, Gary Darnell, because they hadn't had a very good year defensively. Florida was number 3 at the time. Everyone predicted them to win by double digits. Notre Dame ends up winning 39-28. Like that kind of speaks to
the whole Cheerios.
Yeah, like
Notre Dame. What does Notre Dame doesn't belong in a bowl?
Yeah, like what's the difference? But like there was a waitress or a waiter at a restaurant. What's the difference between Notre Dame and Cheerios? Cheerios belongs in a bowl and Notre Dame doesn't, kind of thing. Speak to that. Like that's a perfect example of him just kind of like knowing how to coach in a big game.
Yeah, and okay, and I always that Miami game too. It's such a fine line there. And everybody's seen the stories, and everybody's, heard all the different player accounts from it. But it can go bad in a lot of ways. Like, because if your team, obviously you want your team amped up, but if they are over the edge in a bad way, it can go wrong. If you try to tamp it down, which he made it sound like, the whole story of he's telling giving the motivational speech, talking about like, if anyone does anything, you'll never play football here again, and all this. And also the fact that a guy who was like 5'6" at 120 pounds, like people were fearful of him, like he had that mystique about him, and they were scared, and he knew that. Because the funny thing is too, is like all those players after admitted like Jimmy Johnson would have killed him. Like he's 10 times bigger than him, right?
Yeah.
But they were like, in that moment, they believed it, and they were like, I'm gonna run through a friggin' wall. Like I just, and it's that stuff in those moments that like you look at it, and yes, and you can pick out, disappointing losses and all these kind of things that come out. But like, I think one of those things where you win 100 games at a place where people were like, Notre Dame is done. They can't get back to where they were. No way. It's over. Yeah, they're a team of the past. And even though they weren't that far removed from like Divine winning a national championship, like when, by the end of Faust, like it was within, 77, it was within 10 years. Like now that would sound crazy to do it, but that's how people felt, because all of a sudden Miami's the new big bully on the block, and they're just killing Notre Dame, and it's just not even close. To get it to that point where that's back, it's like you got to build something, and you have to get, no matter what kind of talent you have, there's a lot of like kind of loser mentality that can kind of come from how things went before. And to get rid of that and to build them into like a bully, um, and for all those, like the big wins outnumber, the disappointing losses by wide margin. And I think too, like at the end of it, when we talked about earlier about like whether or not they underachieved or not, I think people might still think that. They might still think maybe they thought that, definitely thought that at the time. But when you look back on what happened after, it's like, it's not even close. Like people yearn for those days. That's why there's so many great memories of this teams that he had. And that's why too, like there's so many people who grew up, like those were their teams. That's how they got into Notre Dame football, was because of Lou Holtz.
And it's also the case that like it also speaks to the era. Like clearly the 89 team was national championship caliber, right? Like you go 12-1, you lose on the road to Miami. And by the way, like speaking of pushing the right buttons, like that was one where I think the press and the media, and we could talk about his relationship with the media a little bit too, and how it hurt him at Notre Dame. Like the media did not like him, especially when it like relative to someone like Bobby Bowden. Like the media gave Bobby Bowden a national title in 93 because they wanted to.
Yeah.
Like that was the deal. They wanted to do it. And the other part was everyone had just decided in 93 that, this is Bobby Bowden's year. They're the best team. They had decided that. And everybody knew, like, I understand Nebraska was ranked 1 in that Orange Bowl, but like Florida State was 2 touchdown favorites or 14-point favorites in that game. Like everybody knew Notre Dame was the second best team, or it was like the other top team who had already beaten them, right? Notre Dame had already beaten them. And I think that one thing that is regrettable about the Florida State game in 93 is like the fact that if you go back and look, there's a 4th and goal. Notre Dame's up 31-17. There's about 3 minutes left ish. Florida State has 4th and goal from like the 20. And Charlie Ward throws a pass to the end zone. And Brian McGee, who was a freshman at the time, instead of just knocking it down, he tries to catch it. And he misses it. It goes through his hands, and it goes right to Kes McCorvey. It's 31-24 at this point. That game ends up going to the final play, right? Which is a great moment, right? Like, oh, final play, Notre Dame, and everyone storms the field. But if he knocks it down, it's 31-17. Notre Dame has a 2-touchdown victory. They're taking knees, right? It doesn't even come down to that. But then the narrative is flipped. It was the last play of the game. Florida State, it's tough. They were the better team, right? Like, I think that was an unfortunate thing that happened. But like also, the media didn't like Holtz's shtick about how Holtz was, he
always undersold the team.
He undersold the team. He was kind of a whiny guy. Like he just came across that way to the media. And so like it cost him in 89. It cost him in 93. I mean, these are 2 separate situations. He got screwed on both ends of it. Oh, yeah. You lost head to head. You're not the national championship. But you lost you won head to head, but the other team won. You lost later. So therefore you can't win the national championship. Like they totally contradicted themselves in opposite sides, right? Like, and I think that hurt him, but like that was the era then. Like that stuff doesn't happen now.
No,
it just doesn't. You get to play. Like obviously they were a top 4 team, top 5 team. All of those years they were top 5 in 90 and 89, 90, 92. You probably would have made the case for them in 91. Like you could have done that, right? So I think that like when we talk about, it's crazy that they only won national title with those teams, but he didn't underachieve in the sense that like he built really great football teams. Like the 89 team was a great football team. The 92 team was a great football team. It's just like it didn't, because of the era and because of how things were decided back then, he just didn't get that benefit of being able to just kind of see it through, And then there was also the way the bowl games played out. Like the 93 team had to play that A&M team that wasn't ranked very high, but it was just kind of way the bowl games went. So, I mean, he built great football teams. It just, because of the era, it didn't play out the way that they needed to.
Yeah, the bowl system was so messed up then.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that it's not totally messed up now, but it was like way worse then.
Yeah.
Well, like even if you think about like how the 94 team, I think the 94, what did they play? 94 team played in the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah, they were 6-1.
Yeah, like come on. Like, and at that time too, because it was Notre Dame. And but also too, he built that up to earn that point. Like Notre Dame was getting all this attention and whatever before, and it was always a big brand, but they kind of put him in that situation again because they were like, well, I mean, it's Notre Dame under Holtz. So it's like, yeah, we can put him in here and it won't be as bad. Like that would never happen. Like, obviously.
No.
And it didn't happen ever again. I don't think. Like, it never happened with any other team. So, and it was just one of those things where for years, I do understand a lot of it, like the Notre Dame hate, because of like they would get the benefit of the doubt in that respect from like the money people and all that. But yeah, they never got the benefit of the doubt when it came to like the media,
the things that actually matter, like from the money aspect. Okay, in 94, like that's the thing.
People hated them because they had the NBC contract.
Right. People hated them because of the NBC contract. In 94, they get the Fiesta Bowl, right? Which they shouldn't have gotten, just straight up. They were not good. They were 6-4-1. Okay. But in 93, they got screwed out of the title. In 89, they got screwed out of the title. Like we're talking about a bowl bid versus national championships. It'd be one thing if in 93 they got to share the national title, and it'd be one thing if in 93 they got to share the national title, and then in 94 they didn't get the Fiesta Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure Notre Dame would rather have had it gone that way, but it didn't. And so like the whole narrative about like the Fiesta Bowl is held over Notre Dame. It's like, yeah, the year before they got screwed out of a championship. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's always that kind of that dichotomy of the way people, Notre Dame gets everything. Like the 90 game, they got screwed on the clipping call. Like, these are national championship defining situations that go against Notre Dame. Like this year, what happened? They didn't make the playoffs because of why? Because of the media, the whole media blitz and everything. Like, it just, I don't know. Now we're getting off on a tangent. It has nothing to do with Lou Holtz. The way that it ended was tough. I mean, he was an interesting guy in the sense that like he didn't like, so if you recall, I think it was the 95 season. Yes, it was definitely 95 season. He had to have neck surgery. It's something wrong with his neck. He had to have neck surgery. And so he had to go up in the booth, and Bob Davie was on the sideline. And Bob Davie beats Vanderbilt. I think it was like 41-0. I think the players like carried him off the field. Lou Holtz didn't like that. He didn't like that, right? He didn't like someone else being carried off of his field when he's up with a neck brace on. And then in 96, the new AD comes in, Mike Wadsworth, and he wants to change some things, and he wants to dictate to Lou Holtz things. Yeah. And Lou Holtz is like, I've never had this. Like, no one's ever come to me talking to me about how to run my program and how to do this, that, and the other thing.
I tell you what I need is what,
exactly. Yeah. And that's how it's always been with Monk Malloy, right? That's been the deal. It didn't happen. And obviously, so that leads to him just like, all right, like, I'm going to leave. That team had national title aspirations. And then it was like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm resigning. At the time, I was like, how does this even work? Like, is there going to be a Notre Dame season? Like, are they going to have a team still? Like, I don't know anything different. Like, he is Notre Dame's head coach. The ending was not the best. It goes that whole saying, like, everything ends badly. And if it wasn't ending badly, it wouldn't end at all. I was at the USC game in '96 when they completely blew that game, like a total disaster. Make an extra point. Speaking of extra points, ruining seasons. It's like the ending was kind of tough, where that went. And then it obviously led to, I mean, decades of futility.
Yeah.
It just.
I'm ironically too, like if you think of how great it's gone with promoting Marcus Freeman as defensive coordinator and kind of him being like the young rising star, and like it was as bad as it went with Davey, and just like it was not. And I think too, like if you've listened to kind of like Bob Davey talk about it too, I do think there's some of it like he was put into that situation of like why Holtz left, and then it's like, well, he had far less leeway, and there was a lot of things that were against him that didn't help him, with all that. But and then I think obviously too with like the disastrous George O'Leary and Ty Willingham, like that couldn't have gone worse. Like that obviously couldn't have gone worse. And it took a long time to get back to where it was. And even as like Brian Kelly came in and obviously had success, like a ton of success, really, like if you think about it, like, considering where they were. But we're not rewriting history with Bob Davey. We're just trying to say that he's not he was definitely going behind his back to try to get the job. He was trying to do it, but he was considered at the time from the outside a very like accomplished defensive.
He was like Marcus Freeman, yes, essentially from a reputation standpoint. Obviously, very different people, but he would have got hired coordinator of the great Texas A&M defenses for sure.
He would have got hired as a head coach somewhere else. Like that was his next job, was going to be head coach. So it was like, and they thought, this guy, he's young, he's this hot rising guy. And then they were like, obviously they're like, well, it was a mistake. But at the time, it wasn't viewed as that. Like it wasn't viewed as that in terms of, his stock as a coach. From the outside. That's there were a lot of people who thought, man, he's going to like modernize things and do this and all that. And it was like, yeah, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. Yeah. I think it's like, speaking of, Pete Carroll, like when you have something like Holtz, when you have something like Carroll, it's hard to just keep it going. I mean, not just that, but like after Tom Osborne, and you go to Frank Solich, and like he did well, but then they got rid of him, and then it just fell off for Nebraska, right? And for Notre Dame, it was the same deal. Like it just you can't recreate it. USC was not able to recreate it. From Pete Carroll, Notre Dame was not able to recreate from Holtz, right? It took them to find Marcus Freeman to finally get that feeling back, right? And we're talking 30 years later. It just like that's how it happened. And so it just like he obviously Holtz created something special at Notre Dame, and everyone's been trying to find it. And I think Notre Dame is finally getting close to that. I mean, certainly close to that, right? With Marcus Freeman and the way that he talks about the program, the way that he's building up the roster, the way Holtz did. I mean, every comparison that we make now with Marcus Freeman is to the Holtz era, which is obviously a credit to Lou Holtz, right? Like, and what he built and the way that the program worked and everything. So, I don't know, man. I mean, I think, to kind of put a bow on it, like obviously he had been in poor health for a long time. We knew this was coming. And so we've had a long time to think about the era that he built at Notre Dame. And for me personally, I always feel a certain kind of way about him because he was the coach of all the games that I remember, like all the games that I recorded as a young teenager. like I vividly remember the 95-96 season, right? I used to have a one of those old media guides from the 89 team where I literally memorized they had every like the play-by-play from the previous season. Like I memorized the play-by-play of the 88 national title team because I just wanted to know what the season was like. How did it go? How did each game go? What was the game flow, right? So that he was the coach at Notre Dame for me. And so I always feel some kind of way about him for that. And I think the stuff with College Game Day and Mark May, like I think that has aged very well, like we said at the top. And I just think I'm grateful that I'm I'm covering the team in an era when Marcus Freeman is around because I feel like this is the closest that we have felt to that kind of Holtz era and the attitude of the program and the way that the program is recruiting and the way the team's being built and the talent that's on display and that they're putting on the field. I'm grateful that it's now back to that because, obviously there's a national title to win for Marcus Freeman to get to that point of Holtz, but it's a lot closer than it ever has been. And it's nice to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I think there were obviously plenty of years where Notre Dame was like, you get a preseason magazine and you're like, Notre Dame's ranked number 2 or number 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of phony. Like they never really had it. It was to sell magazines. Like they never really had the team for it. Where they have a team for it this year. And they obviously went to the national championship a couple years ago. They could have won it last year. Like they were good enough to win it all last year. And that's just something that, like, how Marcus Freeman will be judged later on based on if he won a national championship or how many wins and all that kind of stuff. But I think he's done exactly what Lou Holtz did in the same way, where people said Notre Dame can't do this anymore. It's over. There was people put limits on what it could be. Brian Kelly put limits on what it could be. And even though he came close, like he made the playoff a couple times, he went to the national championship game, he still thought, no, I can't do it here.
Yeah.
Even though he if he just worked harder, he could have maybe got it something, or if he pushed a little bit more, or if he was maybe a nicer guy, he could have got some more things done. And it took the right person to kind of push them in the right way. And I think, Holtz was definitely that person. He had to do a lot more, he had a much tougher job than Freeman coming in than Freeman, but Freeman also didn't have an easy job. It wasn't as built up as it was perceived to be. They won 11 games in the last year. The roster is like his year one Freeman compared to this roster now. It's night and day. It's not even close. There's so much more talent, and he's built it up. I just wanted to mention too, because I don't know if you saw Greg or if anybody else. Reese Davis did a little piece. It was like a little 3-minute thing, like a Sports Center thing. You can find that it's there. It's just like kind of like a breakdown of like his career and then his time at ESPN and stuff too. And he also was on SVP last night. And was interviewed by him, and you could see like he was like fighting back tears talking about Coach Holtz and everything that he meant to him and all those times, and there's some great stories in there, and highly recommend checking that out for if anyone wants to kind of check it out, because I know that like there's so many people who have fond memories of it. It's funny because I know some people too that aren't Notre Dame fans that it's like they have like a reverence for him just based off of that show.
Yeah.
Just based off of that show. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, former players are obviously,
oh yeah,
outpouring of, what he meant to them and, across the, from 86 on to 96, right? Like it meant a lot to him. Yeah. I mean, it's, he had it, he had it. And whatever that it is. And I've kind of compared the 24 team. I compared it to the 92 team. I think this last year was closer to the 90 team, just in terms of just kind of losses that they were better than that, you know. Marcus Freeman's still looking for that 88 team. So hopefully that's coming. Hopefully in 2026. But I think we can end it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I wanted to do a full show on Holtz. I just felt like it was appropriate to do. Obviously a lot of people like, you know, information on the current team and everything. He meant a lot to Notre Dame, and he meant a lot to the program, and there's a lot to talk about. So I felt like it was smart to just do a whole show on him, and then we can, you know, get back to, you know, everything else next week. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you heard, hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know whatever it is we are going live. Mike will be back on Power Hour on Monday, and then we'll be back on Tuesday with everything in Hit and Hustle. So have a good rest of your week, everyone. We will talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.